Jasmine Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't interrupt. But in less than 5 minutes, she left Governor Kristi Noem speechless, exposed and unable to defend her own record. There are moments when the air in a room seems to hold its breath, when everyone knows something's coming and is just waiting for it to begin. That was the atmosphere inside the Dirksen Senate office building last Wednesday morning. Reporters, aides, lawmakers, and camera crews packed the room, yet barely moved. The buzz outside the chamber had quieted the instant Jasmine Crockett stepped through the double doors. Her name had been circulating all week, not because of scandal, but because of something rarer, anticipation. She entered without fanfare. No entourage. No theatrics. Just a quiet, focused walk to her seat, a few folders in hand, and the kind of presence you can't fake. People leaned in as she adjusted her microphone, opened her binder, and looked calmly across the table at Governor Kristi Noem. This wasn't going to be just another hearing. Governor Noem sat upright, a tight smile on her face. She had done this before. Her team had prepped her for hours, talking points, tested phrases, even a media coach waiting outside. But the real challenge wasn't the press. It was Crockett. Noem opened with a brief statement about state leadership, transparency, and the need for honest dialogue. Crockett didn't flinch. She listened, not impatiently or with forced politeness, but like someone letting the rope go slack before pulling it tight. When the chair yielded the floor, the room shifted. Crockett began without flourish, calm, deliberate, firm. Governor Noem, she said, you've spoken about transparency and integrity. I'd like to ask you about a few moments where those values appear to have been in question. Noem chuckled politely, trying to ease the tension. Well, I'm happy to clarify anything that's unclear. That was her first mistake. Crockett didn't react. She simply flipped a page. Let's talk about your recent trip to the UAE. Your office called it a private visit. But donor emails obtained afterward detail meetings with foreign investors and officials. Do you still consider that a private trip? A pen stopped mid-note in the press row. Noem shifted. It was a personal development trip. Not funded by taxpayers. Crockett, unfazed, I didn't ask about funding. I asked if it was private. Meeting with foreign investors and discussing policy abroad, that's diplomacy, not privacy. Noem smiled, thinner this time. We're in a global economy. State leaders should engage internationally. Crockett nodded slightly. So, you're acknowledging it wasn't a personal vacation. It was official business? I wouldn't characterize it that way. That's helpful, Crockett said, marking her notes. Then she pivoted. In the weeks after that trip, 3 donors who accompanied you maxed out contributions to your PAC. Do you recall that? Noem opened her mouth, hesitated, then said, I'd have to check the dates. Crockett raised an eyebrow. You don't know who gave you the maximum legal donation? Another pause. Not off the top of my head. Crockett leaned back. Not smugly, just settled. She'd made her point. No shouting. No theatrics. Just precision. And cracks were beginning to show, but she wasn't done. By her second question, the room had changed. What started as a polished hearing was now unraveling, not loudly, but heavily. People weren't just watching. They were paying attention, because this wasn't just about a trip or campaign money. It was about 2 competing versions of leadership. Crockett didn't come from a political dynasty. Born and raised in St. Louis, she worked her way through law school, served as a public defender in Texas, and had seen firsthand the grinding weight of an unequal system. She didn't get loud for attention, only when it mattered. That made her dangerous in a room like this. She wasn't reading lines. She knew what she was talking about. Her questions weren't scripted, they came from experience. From knowing how people dodge accountability. And how to make them stop. Kristi Noem, on the other hand, had been treated as a rising star for years. She was photogenic, articulate, with a tough stance on conservative values that played well with her base. But Crockett was betting that if You looked closer, you'd see the cracks, and she was right, Governor, Crockett said, flipping to a new section. You've spoken often about family values and public integrity. Can you explain why a consulting firm linked to your campaign received nearly $600,000 last fiscal year, despite no active campaigning? Noem frowned, not in anger, but in confusion. The firm handles multiple services, not all related to campaigning. So the payments were for non-campaign services? Yes. Communications, messaging, brother strategic consulting, Crockett clarified, tapping her pen. Services that benefit you politically? That's a broad interpretation. Crockett gave a polite half-smile. It's your interpretation I'm asking about, Governor. A beat passed, just long enough for cameras to catch Noem exhaling sharply. This wasn't a performance. It was accountability. And Noem hadn't expected it. Crockett's voice never rose. But it didn't have to. Because she wasn't trying to be heard. She was already being listened to. Noem's smile grew tighter. Her answers, vaguer. It wasn't just that she lacked answers, she looked increasingly unsure what game she was playing at all. Outside the hearing room, social media had already lit up. Clips were being trimmed and posted in real time. One viral tweet read, Jasmine Crockett is giving a masterclass on dismantling political spin, live. Back inside, Crockett turned another page. Governor, she said evenly, you recently criticized the Department of Education for federal overreach. Yet your state accepted a $12 million federal grant last year for school safety initiatives. Do you believe states should reject federal funds tied to policies they oppose? Noem's tone shifted. Federal funding comes with obligations, but states can still express disagreement with mandates. Crockett didn't miss a beat. Did you express disagreement before or after the check cleared? Silence. A few muffled coughs. Noem shifted in her seat. I'm not here to debate political philosophy, she finally said. Crockett looked up. You're here to answer for your record, Governor. That's not philosophy. That's accountability. The room didn't erupt. It froze. Not from shock, just because there was nothing left to say. It was rare to watch someone stand their ground that calmly, that effectively, in real time. Even more striking, Crockett wasn't gloating. No smirk. No grandstanding. She was just doing her job, with a precision that left Noem very little room to breathe. And the real turning point was still ahead. By the time the third round of questioning began, Noem no longer looked self-assured. Her back remained straight. But the lightness in her voice had vanished. Her staffers had stopped exchanging glances. Now, they were just watching, like everyone else. Crockett adjusted her mic and leaned in, not to intimidate, but to close the gap. Her voice stayed even. Governor, let's revisit your views on government accountability. You've criticized federal agencies for a lack of transparency, correct? I have, Noem replied. And yet your office recently denied 3 public records requests from investigative journalists in PR concerning out-of-state contracts signed by your administration. Would you say that's consistent with your public stance? Noem hesitated. Those requests were denied due to security concerns and ongoing administrative reviews. Crockett blinked once. Security concerns? For public infrastructure contracts? There were complexities involved. And who determines those complexities, Governor? Our legal team conducts that assessment. Crockett nodded slowly and pulled out a printed document. So this letter, where your office wrote, quote, the documents requested do not serve the public interest, is that your legal team's phrasing or yours? Noem glanced toward her counsel. That's standard language used in responses. Standard, Crockett repeated. Meaning it's used often. Another hush. Not the first, but deeper now, tension layered over discomfort. Noem cleared her throat. Congresswoman, I don't think this is the right venue to discuss active document requests. You've made your views on transparency public, Crockett replied. So let's discuss them publicly. Noem's posture shifted slightly. She crossed her arms, a small movement, but but in this room, every gesture had weight. Crockett continued, almost gently, you once said that leadership means never asking others to do what you wouldn't do yourself. So when the public asks for basic access to government activity, why is the default answer no? Noem said nothing. Is it a matter of principle? I support transparency, Noem finally said. But not at the expense of state security or efficient operations. Crockett looked genuinely curious. Can you name one instance where releasing a contract posed a legitimate security threat? Noem flipped a few papers, then sighed, I don't have one in front of me. Crockett leaned back, thank you. It was her tone, calm, collected, unflinching, that made the moment land like a scalpel. Not a wound that gushed blood, but one that would sting longer the more it was examined. Meanwhile, phones buzzed across Capitol Hill. Live streams. TikToks. Twitter threads. Clips of the exchange spread not because Crockett had tried to go viral, but because she hadn't point one microphone near the media row caught someone whispering, she's not letting her off the hook. And she wasn't. Crockett wasn't improvising. She had done her homework so thoroughly that when Noem tried to pivot, there was nowhere to go. The facts boxed her in. At one point, Noem glanced back at her aides, but this wasn't the kind of moment a whisper could fix. This wasn't about messaging. It was about reality. Crockett hadn't just come prepared. She had come ready for every answer. Noem didn't have. There's a specific kind of discomfort that settles in when someone powerful realizes they're losing control of the narrative, and there's no way to spin it back. Crockett wasn't emotional. She wasn't reactive. That made each word more precise, and more piercing, and still, the moment that would make hearing history hadn't arrived yet. That came when Crockett paused, not from fatigue, but to let the room catch up. She flipped a page in her binder. Then calmly slid a document across the table to Noem. Governor, she said, I'd like to direct your attention to this transcript. It's from a town hall you hosted in Rapid City 2 months ago. Noem glanced at it, unsure of where this was going. At that town hall, Crockett continued, you told constituents, we don't accept federal overreach. South Dakota stands independent. Is that accurate? Yes, Noem nodded. I stand by that. Great, Crockett replied, just once, because 5 days later, your office filed paperwork requesting an additional $3.4 million in federal subsidies, tied directly to infrastructure projects. The silence that followed didn't need explanation. The facts had already done the talking. Regulated by the very federal agency she'd publicly criticized. That's what made the room react, a soft gasp, barely audible, but unmistakable. Someone hadn't hidden their surprise well enough. Crockett didn't even look up. Was that request made with your knowledge? She asked plainly. Noem blinked. We pursue funding when it benefits the people of South Dakota. Crockett's tone didn't change. Even when it comes from an agency you've called unconstitutional? Noem leaned forward slightly, trying to reframe. There's a difference between opposing federal control and using resources our citizens have a right to. Crockett raised an eyebrow. So when it's convenient, you're willing to compromise your stated principles? I don't see it that way. I know you don't, Crockett said. But the record does. That was it. Point one sentence. Not shouted. Not mocking. But it landed harder than anything else said so far, because it rang as something deeper than political critique. It was familiar. It was the exposed contradiction, the politician who says one thing on camera and does another behind the curtain. Crockett didn't flinch. She let the silence stretch. A few chairs creaked. Even the stenographer slowed. That's how still the room became. Noem was the one to finally break the pause. If you're suggesting I'm being dishonest, I don't need to suggest it, Crockett cut in gently. The paper trail does that. Outside the chamber, social media was exploding. Hashtags bearing both names were trending. But inside, Crockett remained focused, composed, relentless, not there to embarrass, but to expose. She tapped another document, already highlighted. Let's move to public statements about out-of-state hiring. You've said repeatedly that you prioritize South Dakotans for state-level appointments. Is that accurate? Yes, Noem replied. We always look in-state first. Crockett pulled a printout from her folder. Then explain this, your most recent economic advisor was hired from a consulting firm in Scottsdale, Arizona. No ties to South Dakota's economy. Why? Noem opened her mouth, closed it. That hire was based on expertise, not local ties. Sometimes expertise comes from beyond state lines. Even when your campaign promised to put your own people first? That's a gross simplification. No, Crockett replied, her tone sharpening just slightly, it's a direct quote from your campaign ad. That clip would rack up over 5 million views by midnight. But inside the room, you didn't need the internet to know something had shifted. Even Noem's supporters were quiet, watching her sit with questions she couldn't answer. Crockett didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply turned the page. On to the next point. Like this was routine, and that was what made the hearing unforgettable. Not just the facts, but the control. The calm certainty that Crockett wielded. She wasn't performing. She was revealing. One deliberate step at a time, and just when it seemed things couldn't get more uncomfortable, she reached the final section of her binder. Governor Noem, she began, voice still composed, I have one more area I'd like to address. Noem sat motionless, her hands folded tightly in front of her. The smile she wore at the beginning was gone, replaced not by anger, but by something stiffer. Bracing, in a recent interview on KLQ radio, Crockett continued, you said. And I quote, every dollar spent from the public budget is accounted for. We don't hide behind complicated language or off-the-books accounting like other places. Is that still your view? Yes. Absolutely. Crockett nodded. Good. Then help me understand something. She held up a single-page document according to your own budget office, nearly $2.1 million last year was allocated to a category labeled State Security Consultation and Outreach. Can you clarify what that entails? Noem didn't answer right away. That category includes contracted services, security evaluations, facility audits, outreach events. Outreach events? Yes. State-sponsored events focused on safety awareness. Crockett tilted her head. Because when my staff looked into those vendors, one name came up repeatedly, Prairie Vista Strategies. A newly registered LLC in Sioux Falls. No employees. No prior contracts. No online presence. No physical office. Noem's lips parted. As if to respond, but nothing came out. Crockett pressed forward, the registered agent is Wyatt Fielding. A longtime donor to your campaign. A cough broke the silence from somewhere in the gallery. No one else moved. Can you explain how a political donor with no security credentials was awarded a $600,000 contract for undefined outreach services? Noem's voice was slower now. The Department of Public Safety managed that contract. I wasn't involved in vendor selection. Crockett raised an eyebrow. But the payments were authorized by your office, correct? They were processed. Authorized, Governor. Pause. Yes. Then, for a moment, everything stopped. Crockett said nothing. Neither did Noem. The room had gone so still even the stenographer's keystrokes paused. 10 seconds passed then. Calmly, Crockett leaned in, do you understand how this looks to the people watching at home? Noem blinked rapidly, I stand by the integrity of my office. Even when a shell company run by a campaign donor receives a no-bid, high-value contract for vague services? I'll review the contract in question. Noem's voice was quieter now. Crockett closed her folder slowly, you had every opportunity to review it before today. You knew I'd ask. So I'll ask again, how do you explain it? Noem exhaled hard, her lips pressed tight, I don't have that explanation on hand. There it was. The sentence. The crack in the wall no one could patch. The words hung in the air like steam off pavement and no one moved. The chair didn't interrupt. The aides didn't whisper. Even the reporters and interns sat frozen because. What could you say after that? Crockett didn't gloat. She didn't even look pleased. She simply placed her hands on the table and looked directly at Governor Noem, not angry. Not triumphant. Just disappointed. The hearing went on, of course, other speakers, more questions, the usual formalities. But everyone in the room knew. The moment had already happened, and it wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was just a truth too raw to dodge. Outside the chamber, the ripple became a wave. Reporters scrambled to get their segments ready. Staffers opened group chats. Political strategists were already drafting talking points. Before the clip had even finished uploading online, no one waited. That single moment, "I don't have that explanation on hand," was everywhere within minutes. It echoed not because it was dramatic, but because it was unfiltered. Real. The kind of line that didn't need embellishment. But Crockett hadn't just landed a blow, she had exposed something deeper. The consequences were still unfolding. By late afternoon, the clip hit 1 million views. News outlets raced to catch up. Twitter, Instagram, even Facebook, all lit up with the same 39-second clip. Jasmine Crockett, calm and unblinking, looking Governor Noem in the eye as Noem faltered. What made the moment viral wasn't just the quote. It was what came after, the silence. The stare. The restraint. Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't interrupt. She just waited. And the weight of that silence said everything. Someone watching the hearing live clipped the moment and posted it online. "This is how you hold power accountable," the caption read. No hashtags. No commentary. Just the line, "Cable news tried to keep pace." MSNBC played the clip 3 times in a row during primetime. Fox spun it differently, but even their panel couldn't deny it. Noem hadn't been ready. Crockett was in a different league, one analyst admitted. In classrooms, college students studied the footage as a case in nonverbal dominance. On TikTok, teens lip-synced Crockett's line, ***, "It's your interpretation I'm asking about, Governor, ***, like it was from a courtroom drama. But inside the Capitol, things were less flashy. Crockett didn't linger. She walked out quietly. Just one aide beside her. Reporters shouted questions. She didn't break stride. She didn't need to. Her words were still playing on every screen. Governor Noem slipped out a side exit flanked by 2 staffers. No comment. In the days that followed, Crockett's inbox filled with thousands of messages. Some praise. Some outrage. But nearly all acknowledged what had happened. People had seen something rare. A leader who didn't yell, didn't perform, didn't showboat, but still took control of the room. Not with noise, but with preparation. The clip was dissected frame by frame. Body language experts weighed in. A morning show psychologist called it low-volume dominance. A style even seasoned trial lawyers struggle to maintain under pressure. But beyond the media buzz, there was something else. This wasn't just about how Crockett carried herself. It was about what she represented. Someone who didn't look or sound like the political elite had walked into a room built to protect power, and cracked it open. Crockett never pounded the table. Never demanded silence. Never played to the camera. She didn't need to. She brought receipts. And that was louder than any speech. In a kitchen in Sioux Falls, 2 women in their 60s watched the clip over coffee. "She didn't even blink," one said. "She just kept pressing. Didn't yell either," the other replied. "Made her look stronger." They weren't pundits. They didn't use political jargon. But they knew what they'd seen, someone who did the work and made the truth uncomfortable. A week earlier, they didn't know Jasmine Crockett's name. Now they were telling their neighbors about her. Meanwhile, in Washington, Noem's team scrambled. Talking points were rehearsed. Press releases were drafted. But the moment couldn't be undone. Not when it was burned into the public record. Not when anyone could replay it with a single click. Crockett didn't rush to the Sunday shows. She didn't gloat. She went back to work. Meetings. Constituents. Bills to read. Behind the scenes, though, her phone never stopped buzzing. Colleagues, some allies, some critics, reached out. One text simply read, "I've never seen Noem caught off like that." Even those who disagreed with Crockett's politics admitted it. She hadn't shown up to throw punches. She showed up with the facts. And when the answers didn't hold, she let the silence do the rest. The next wave of attention wasn't about clips or retweets, it was about what came next. By Thursday morning, headlines shifted. The viral moment faded into something heavier now. The questions were about the contracts, the timelines, the LLC, the numbers that didn't add up, and that was exactly what Crockett wanted. In Capitol hallways, other members of Congress approached her. Some offered polite praise. Others just nodded as they passed, the quiet recognition reserved for someone who just changed the room. Crockett didn't flinch. She wasn't there for applause. She never had been. Her message, in public and private, stayed the same. It's not about who talks the loudest. It's about who does the work. And she had done the work. Every quote, every document, every financial trail, she had combed through it herself. This line of questioning? This was hers, because for her, accountability wasn't performance. It was proof. At a closed-door lunch the next day, a senator leaned over and whispered, "You're making people nervous." Crockett didn't hesitate. Maybe they should be. Meanwhile, Noem stayed quiet. Her usual interviews were cancelled. Her press secretary issued a vague statement promising clarity in the coming days, but offered no corrections, no rebuttals. That silence only made things worse. In South Dakota, local reporters picked up the thread. One investigative story out of Sioux Falls uncovered that Prairie Vista Strategies, the LLC at the center of Crockett's questioning, had been formed just weeks before the contract was awarded. The NO office. No website. No employees. No business history. That report didn't mention Crockett. It didn't have to. She had planted the seed, the rest was growing all on its own, and back in Washington, she returned to her committee seat, like it was any other week. She didn't post selfies. She didn't go on late-night shows. She sat in budget briefings, met with housing advocates, took calls from constituents, just like always, but everywhere she went, one line followed her, "I don't have that explanation on hand." It wasn't a zinger anymore. It had become a symbol of how far some officials will go to dodge transparency, of how rare it is for someone to press past the surface, and what it means when someone finally does. In a local Dallas interview, Crockett kept her tone steady. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone," she said. "I'm here to make sure the people in power can't pretend no one's watching. Because people are watching. They just need someone willing to ask the right questions, and wait long enough for the real answers." It wasn't a sound bite. It was a challenge. Elsewhere, the ripple became action. Several watchdog groups filed formal requests for federal review of the contracts mentioned in the hearing. An ethics panel opened a preliminary inquiry into donor-linked appointments in state governments. And quietly, behind closed doors, governors in other states began reviewing their procurement processes, because the message wasn't just for Kristi Noem. It was for anyone who thought these hearings were performative. Crockett walked into a room where she was expected to play along, smile, move on. Instead, she pulled the thread. And that thread was tied to real names, real money, real decisions made behind closed doors. Now, those doors were creaking open. But her most meaningful moment didn't happen on camera. It came later that night, long after the crews had packed up. After the noise faded, in the quiet corridors of the Capitol, the building had settled into its nighttime rhythm, the hum of floor polishers, aides catching up on emails, muted footsteps on marble. Crockett walked toward the elevators, binder under one arm, coat folded over the other. She wasn't in a rush. There was no one left to impress. Just the rhythm of heels echoing down the hall, and a mind still sorting through everything she hadn't yet unpacked. Congresswoman Crockett. She turned to IT. Was Representative Sylvia Boyd from Oregon, a moderate Democrat, careful with her words, rarely the type to pick a side publicly. She approached with her arms crossed, not defensively, more like someone weighing something quietly. I just wanted to say, Boyd said, pausing, what you did in that room today, that was real. Crockett nodded. Appreciate that. Boyd hesitated. You know it's not gonna sit well with some of them, right? Crockett gave a small grin. Has it ever? That earned a faint smile from Boyd. They stood in silence as the elevator took its time, then Boyd lowered her voice. I've been here more than a decade. I've seen hearings used for ego, for theater, for campaign footage. But today reminded me why we're supposed to have them. Crockett's face softened, not out of pride, but recognition. It's not personal, she said. It's the job. Boyd nodded. Wish more people remembered that. The elevator doors opened behind them. Neither moved at first, then Boyd looked up. You made her answer. Not dodge. Not spin. Just answer. Crockett stepped into the elevator. Or not answer, she replied. But either way, people saw it. As the doors began to close, Crockett gave the smallest nod, nothing staged, just an acknowledgement from one public servant to another. A quiet confirmation that maybe something had landed deeper than a headline. The next morning, Crockett's office was flooded, interview requests. Podcast pitches. Morning show invites. Even networks that had never called before were suddenly interested. Her team sorted through them. She declined most. Because this wasn't about the moment, that IT was about the work, but one message made her pause to an email. No subject. No signature. Just a short note, watched you yesterday. Never seen someone like me sit across from someone like her, and win. Thank you. Crockett stared at it for a while before replying. Wasn't trying to win, she typed. Just making sure she had to answer. Out loud. Back in South Dakota, pressure was building. Local journalists had picked up the trail. More discrepancies were surfacing. Questions were now being asked on the record that weren't even imagined a week earlier. Some of Noem's longtime allies had gone quiet on social media. A scheduled speaking engagement in Des Moines was quietly rescheduled. The IT wasn't dramatic. But it was a shift, not because Crockett had gone viral, but because she'd asked the kinds of questions that couldn't be spun away. And in politics, silence isn't always safety. Sometimes, it's the first sign the ground is shifting. But for Crockett, the weight of it all didn't come from headlines or praise. It came a few days later. Back in Dallas, she walked into her district office just after 8 a.m. Coffee cups on desks. Phones ringing. Letters being sorted. The usual rhythm. But something felt different, not frantic. Not celebratory. Just focused. As if everyone had quietly agreed the work mattered a little more now. She hung her blazer by the door and walked toward her office when her assistant stopped her. There's someone here to see you. She nodded toward the waiting area. A young man, early 20s, maybe, stood when he saw her. Baseball cap in hand, nervous energy in his posture. Are you Congresswoman Crockett? I am. My name's Tyrell. I go to El Centro. I just wanted to say, I watched the hearing. All of it. Twice. Crockett smiled. Twice. He laughed, sheepish. Yeah, I was gonna study accounting. But now I don't know. I've never seen someone who looked like you say the things you said, and not back down. You didn't yell. You just made her answer. And she couldn't. Crockett paused, then motioned to a chair. Come sit. They talked for 10 minutes. He wasn't asking for anything. He just wanted to say he saw her, and that quietly, unmistakably, something had changed. He didn't come asking for anything. He just needed to say it, out loud, that seeing someone stand up like that made him feel like maybe there was space for him too. That he didn't have to talk louder. Didn't have to dress different. Didn't have to become someone else just to be heard. And for Jasmine Crockett, that was the moment, not the trending clip. Not the cable news hits. Not the texts from colleagues or the headlines calling her unflinching. It was this one young man, sitting across from her, saying, "You made me think maybe I can do it too." Because Crockett never set out to go viral. She didn't want to be the story. Her goal was simple: shine light on the things powerful people try to hide behind, and when you do that, with honesty, without ego or spectacle, it ripples in ways you can't always see in people you may never meet again. Outside, the world kept spinning. The news cycle moved on. Other hearings happened. Kristi Noem's office issued a flat statement. They welcomed oversight. They were evaluating internal processes. It didn't say much. It wasn't meant to, but the truth had already landed. And it wasn't going away. Crockett's hearing clip started showing up in political science courses. Law professors pulled the transcript to teach precision questioning, but more than how it was said, people were asking why it worked, because Crockett didn't show up with slogans. She showed up with facts. She didn't try to score applause. She asked the questions no one else would put on the record. And when the answers didn't come, she let the silence speak. There's a kind of strength in that. A quiet, steady kind. The kind that doesn't always get celebrated, but gets remembered. A week later, Tyrell sent her office an email. Just one line: switched my major to political science. Don't know where it'll go yet, but now I want to find out. Crockett printed it. Slipped it into the back of her binder, the same one from the hearing, not to remember the viral moment, but to remember why she spoke up at all, because she knew something else. This wasn't the endpoint. 2 weeks later, the committee reconvened. Different suits. Different headlines, but the room felt different. Crockett entered the way she always did, no entourage, no dramatics, just a folder in one hand and quiet resolve in the other. But this time, people noticed, not with curiosity. With respect. Colleagues who hadn't said a word to her last time nodded as she passed. Staffers straightened their papers. Even the reporters lowered their voices, because they remembered. They remembered how she made silence feel louder than shouting. How she used facts, not insults. How she peeled back the polished surface and made someone answer, not for show. Not for politics. For the people, the ones watching, tired of the dodge. That day, her questions weren't flashy. She didn't raise her voice. But the rhythm was the same, precise, direct, undeniable. The room didn't erupt. It leaned in. Afterward, one senior member of the committee, someone who'd been in Congress longer than Crockett had practiced law, approached her quietly. "A lot of us stopped expecting hearings to matter," he said. Crockett looked him in the eye. "Maybe we should change what we expect." He nodded. No rebuttal. Just a man rethinking what leadership should look like. Outside, the world had moved on. But something stayed behind. In the inboxes of local reporters. On the desks of young law students. In the slow, steady way public attention shifts, when something real breaks through the noise, because Noem still hadn't answered the question. Why was there no explanation? And that's what accountability looks like. The IT doesn't always show up with lights and volume. Sometimes it walks in quietly, waits its turn, then asks the one question no one else dared to. That's what Jasmine Crockett did. She reminded the country that public service isn't polite theater. It's truth-telling. Even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable, and maybe that's the lesson. Leadership isn't dodging. It isn't polished talking points. It's facing real questions, with real answers. It's remembering who you work for, even when it's inconvenient. It's showing up. So, if you're watching this, and you've ever felt like the truth doesn't matter anymore, remember this. Remember the silence. Remember the young man who changed his major because he saw someone like him speak with power, without apology. And remember, you don't need a title or a spotlight to hold power accountable. You just need to pay attention. Ask the question. And refuse to let silence be the final word. If this story meant something to you, share it. Because moments like this only matter if we don't let them fade.